Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going over all of the books that I read in September. September was a very reading month for me. It wasn't my favorite reading month. I did read a few books for different reading vlogs, so I will reference those, but I just had such a meh month, and then I ended the month with a 5-star, which is very exciting. So let's just kind of jump right into everything. So to end my reading all of my vampire books on my TBR reading vlog, which if you have not seen that, I will link that everywhere for you guys, I read Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chapeko, and I went into this one thinking that this was going to be my favorite. I had heard so many amazing things about this book. I felt like it was going to be my favorite vampire book that I was going to read, and I ultimately gave it 2 stars, which is so disappointing. So in this book, you're following Remy, and he is a reaper, which is someone who kind of protects their town from vampires. And very quickly you find that there's a new kind of breed of vampire going around, which they call the Rot, and it's kind of like how I envisioned it, was like a zombie vampire, and Remy wants to go investigate this alone, but somehow these 2 vampires that are I don't think they're essentially a prince and a princess, but they kind of are, they're together, they're engaged, are going to help him figure out what this Rot is and why it's taking over these towns and killing all of these people and spreading and spreading. And that is what the premise says on the back, and that's just kind of a very small portion of this book. I personally felt like this book, that plot was just a subplot. Like, it wasn't the main plot. I felt like because this author really wanted Remy and this couple to become a polyamorous couple, their story was written as the forefront, and I would have been okay with that had I known that this was going to be very romance heavy. I really wanted that fantasy, going to figure out what this Rot is and fighting all these people sort of situation, and it just didn't work out. There were so many instances where a chapter would start with us going to do this big plot build-up situation, like there's something happening, we need to go work on this, and it could have been something that could have been dragged out a few chapters, and it was just quick fixed within the chapter, and we moved back to the romance. And I felt like that could have been so much more of the plot, and it just wasn't. There was also a couple of big reveals at the end that I feel like if you're a thriller reader, or if you read at all, you just know, hey, if you're gonna bring up something multiple times, there's probably gonna be something that happens with that plot line. So the big reveals at the end, I wasn't really shocked by. I know this is going to be a series, but I'm just not interested in continuing it, although this cover is literally everything. I just felt like the plot lines were kind of skimmed over, and it was just mostly romance heavy, which is just not what I really wanted with this. So unfortunately I gave it a 2-star, but if you want to see a full in-depth review, definitely check out that vampire reading vlog. Next, I read a book that I actually got a digital arc for, and it's funny, it's a digital arc, but it actually came out in July, so this book is already out. It is a YA horror book. It is called Camp Lanier, and it's by Sylvester Barzy. I ended up giving this one a 3-star. I tend to really enjoy YA horror. I don't know what it is about YA horror, but I feel like they really lean heavy into the paranormal monster slasher genre versus adult horror, which is just kind of, I guess, all things that are adults are scared of, so anxiety and things. But I tend to really like it, and Camp Lanier for me was just a very much so a 3-star. I felt like the writing felt almost middle grade. If it wasn't for some of the scenarios and things that were happening, I could have classified this as a middle grade horror book. It was written with a lot of slang that I just haven't really come across a lot in any of my YA horror, and it was a little bit more difficult to read. However, I will say that I did enjoy it quite a bit because it had that supernatural element. It had a lot of Get Out theming, and it was pretty good. The pacing was really quick, which I do quite enjoy. In this book, we're following Taylor, who is one of the only Black private school kids at her school, and she's only there because of a basketball scholarship, so she already feels very left out in these situations, and she ends up getting herself into a little bit of trouble, which isn't even that's a whole plot in itself. I was so annoyed with the way she got in trouble because it was very prejudiced. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I was so annoyed with that, and I just hated that little group of friends she had. But because of that, she goes to court, and the court's like, you can either go to jail or you can go to this camp, which does kind of like a work release program, and work the camp for the summer. Obviously, she chooses to go to the camp because she doesn't want to go to jail. She starts as a camp counselor, and immediately out the gate, she starts seeing a lot of creepy things. There's this big urban legend, which I have been loving urban legends, about these like ghosts that haunt the camp and people that go missing. Very Get Out style, and she is very determined to figure out what the heck is going on. And it goes from very quickly urban legend to slasher really quick, and I did like that transition. I thought that was really fun to follow, and the whole story about how there's like a town under the lake, loved that too. But I just felt like it felt a little too middle grade for me, which is why I gave it a 3-star. But it was a good horror, and if it's something like, I think if you're not ready for adult horror yet, dig your toes into YA horror. It's pretty fun, and it's not as scary as it could be. Next, I read one of my book of the month books. If you're not signed up for book of the month, you absolutely should be. I'll put my referral link down below. You can get your first hardcover for $5. This is my August pick. This is Like Mother Like Daughter by Kimberly McCreight. I read one Goodreads review that said, go into this completely blind, do not read the plot. And although I think I did read the plot when I did order this book, I didn't read it before I started reading it. I didn't read the plot. What? I didn't read the synopsis before I started reading the book because I wanted to go into it blind, which is kind of fun with a thriller. Again though, I did give this one 3 stars. I'll go through the plot kind of briefly because I too agree you should go into it a little bit blind, but you are following from the perspective of a mother and a daughter. The daughter's timeline is present day and the mother's timeline is like a week before, because the mother ends up going missing. So the daughter, you start with her finding that her mom is missing, and the mother is like a week leading up to the disappearance. So you can kind of see what happens and like what's leading up to that, and then the daughter is like trying to find where her mom is. And I do think that it was written really well. There's a few bits of mixed media in here, which is fun. I really enjoy mixed media. I feel like it kind of helps a plot really develop, and I don't know, it just adds a little bit of extra something to it, which I quite like. But I felt like as a thriller, this was just okay. There was a lot of kind of slow parts, a lot of like meh during the middle I just didn't care about. I wanted to get back to the plot. It wasn't as fast paced as I had hoped. However, there's a lot of times at the end of a thriller where I'm just like, oh, that's it. This ending was really good. I did quite enjoy this ending. Once we were like getting to the big reveal, I was like, oh, I feel like this is what it's gonna be, and it made sense, so it all kind of evened out. But then there was like an additional reveal that I really liked. So I would say this is an okay thriller. If you're interested in reading it, I would still suggest picking it up, but it's not one of those thrillers I think you should run out and go grab. It is very much so a middle of the road okay thriller. The next 3 books that I read are for a new vlog that is going to be coming in a couple of weeks, so I'm super excited. So I'll kind of go through these a little bit briefly as well, because you'll get my full thoughts in that reading vlog. But at first, I read My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This has been on my TBR for such a long time, and the premise is something that I felt like I would have really enjoyed. But again, I sadly gave it 3 stars, and I'm still on the fence if I should continue this series or not, because the entire first 2/3 of this book I was going to give it a 1 star, and then the ending just was one of those endings that I really liked, so I ended up bumping it up to a 3 star. So should I continue this Indian Lake trilogy? Let me know. But in this book we are following Jade, and Jade is a senior in high school, and she's a hardcore slasher movie fan. She loves slasher movies, but to the point where it's obsessive, where she thinks there is a slasher in her town surrounding her lake. And so she lives in a very small kind of, I don't even want to say suburban, but I would say more so rundown town. And across the lake they're building this like incredible mansion community, and she is convinced that one of the girls who's also a senior that's moving in there is the final girl in a slasher. So she's convinced herself there's a slasher going on, and there is like murders happening, but we're following that whole plot line. And then you get to the end and it's just crazy. It's kind of everything I liked in a horror at the end. I don't want to give anything away because I felt like the reveal was so good in my eyes. Like I really enjoyed it enough to bump it up 2 stars. And I do like slasher movies, so there is a lot of references to slashers, and she just like briefly will mention characters that I feel like if you haven't seen a lot of scary movies, you're not going to get those references, and that I feel almost adds to the story. So I would go into this if you do like slasher movies with that in mind. But I really liked the ending. The first 2/3 was just like me kind of like just trying to get through this book. So I don't know if I want to continue this trilogy. I'm kind of still on the fence about it. I might though. Should I? I don't know. Next I read a book that was another 3-star. Bunny by Mona Awad. Again, I've been wanting to read this book for so long. This book is so short, and it's everything everyone says it is. It is a weird book. It is a fever dream of a book. You're confused 100% of the time, and then things kind of get revealed to you. I didn't really love it. It was a 3-star. It was okay. So in this book you're following, is her name Samantha? Yeah, so in this book you're following Samantha. Samantha's like a poetry student, and there's this group of girls called bunnies that she like says she hates, but she wants to be a part of this little group so bad. And one day she gets invited to one of their little parties that they're having, and she quickly becomes a bunny, and she sees all the weird shit that they're doing, because they're doing some weird shit. And it kind of, the story progresses from there. She wants to be a part of it, and then she doesn't want to be a part of it anymore, but it's still being pulled back to her. And she wants to go back to her old friends and her old life, and it's just not really working out anymore because of what she's seen. And I will say, I wish that we got to be in the bunnies' parties a little bit more, because I felt like the stuff that they're doing was interesting to me. I quite enjoyed reading that. And I know a lot of people say the end is really weird, and it is. It's very weird. The ending is just like, I didn't see any of that coming. But to be honest, I was a little bit more sad about the ending. I felt like the ending was more sad than it was weird, because it all kind of clicked, and I just felt bad for Samantha. But yeah, this was just a 3-star. I don't know if I'm gonna pick up anything else by Mona Awad. I've heard all of her books kind of read the same, and although she's a great writer, because if you can make somebody feel like they're in a fever dream while reading a book, you're obviously a great writer. I just don't care to read more, so 3 stars. The final book that I read in September, my 5-star, don't be shocked, I finally read Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This has been sitting on my TBR for almost a year. I feel like you all know the plot line of Fourth Wing. We're following this girl named Violet who's going to this war college to be a dragon rider, to be a part of the Fourth Wing Riders Quadrant. It's romantasy, it's fun. I really liked it. It gave me, it's kind of hard to explain, but I'm gonna try. You know when you first read a series when you're a kid and you become so entranced by that series and you want to know everything about everything? Like for me it was Harry Potter, so I like needed to know everything about everything, and thankfully we were given all of that information. It almost felt like that for me. Like it felt like nostalgic reading this. It felt so, there's just not the word I can process right now that I can put it on. I really enjoyed it. I've heard horrible things about the next book, but I'm really excited to read it because we were left on a cliffhanger. And I'll say the same thing about Fourth Wing that I said about Silver Under Nightfall. If you mention something enough, I'm not going to be shocked at the end when it comes up. So we were left on a cliffhanger, but I also kind of felt that ending coming in a weird way. So if you know, you know, but it's a 5-star. If you haven't read Fourth Wing yet and you like romantasy, or if you liked ACOTAR, you're gonna like it. It's really good. So yeah, this was a 5-star. I read it really quick and I really loved it. Those are all 6 books that I read in the month of September. It was a fairly decent reading month up until the end, thankfully. Then it became good, because when you read a lot of 3 stars back to back to back, I feel like I went into a little bit of a reading slump, and I just, oh, Fourth Wing really brought me out of it, which is fantastic. A pretty mediocre reading month, I'll say, but I'm very happy to have finally read this. So definitely check out those reading vlogs. I'll link them down below, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.